Okay, so my Arcane obsession hasn't faded, but can you blame me? I mean, look at these characters. Today though, we're going back to my favorite video of last year and making the Wolf of the Kindred duo from the Blood, Sweat, and Tears music video. There's also a special announcement about this doll, so make sure you stick around so you don't miss it. Going straight into Blender, I modified some files to match the screenshots I took. It's not going to be completely perfect because again, I'm making a character without any fully helpful images, but hey, I can make it work. In most shots, we can see that there's these glowing markings, so I make indents mimicking those on his chest, upper arms, and legs. This time, I'm actually going to be challenging myself to paint the glowing effect instead of using LEDs. One, because I started this project right as I was juggling finals, and I did not have time to rig up LEDs, and two, why not push myself to learn something new? Once I have enough of the body sculpted, I start to print. At first I thought I was going to use a black as a base color, but it turned out way too dark and apparently my brush didn't like that idea either. So I ended up mixing a bluish gray for a base instead. I didn't realize until after I tried to start making the actual gray paint, but I ran out of white, so my mom while she was out picked up a few bottles. Don't mind that brown, that's just leftover paint from making Mbessa. On camera you can't really tell the difference, but adding a bit of blue in the gray creates an illusion that is just as intense and rich as a black paint without it actually being too dark and losing depth. It actually took me a minute to decide how I wanted to paint his skin. And no, I don't mean just painting the base color, I mean making the end result a bit more interesting. It was hard to see the texture his 3D model was painted with in the music video because all the scenes are dark, but I still wanted it to feel arcane, and arcane is definitely not just a flat color. At first I tried to paint swirls, but it just kind of ended up looking like I was trying to paint fur and then failed miserably, so that wasn't going to work. After playing around a bit, I ended up using a slanted brush to create the texture. Again, you can't really see the difference here, but trust me, this was way better than what I was doing before. Like you probably are right now, I was seriously doubting my paint job, so I started putting him together to get a better idea of how it would look overall. I made the lightest tone a bit too light, so I went over everything with a black wash and that really made it look a lot better. For the markings themselves, I referenced several videos on how to paint the glowing effect. My favorite was this one here, which I'll leave a link to in the description. I'm first going in with the main color of the light source so I don't overwhelm myself later. My red paint is pretty thin, so I'm globbing on thick streaks of it. Once that's fully dry, I use this round brush, which I made from cutting an old brush, RIP brush, to start painting on the fade. I do this by watering down the original red paint. I did about 3 layers, each time making the paint a little bit thicker and staying closest to the edge. This is where you're really going to have to trust the process because it was looking like a mess and I was starting to regret my decisions, but you just really have to trust the process. When everything is absolutely dry, I mix 2 peachish reddish pinks for the highlights. This will really set off the glowing illusion. I find that red is a really hard color to make glow, especially if you're a beginner. If you just add white to the red paint, it'll just start looking like Valentine's Day threw up. The lighter versions of the red paint will just look entirely too pink instead of an intensified red. So because I'm not an expert at mixing color yet, I just washed over everything with a thin layer of red paint to make sure and force it to look right. After I was done having a small panic, I think it actually turned out pretty good. My camera always seems to make things look awful when I'm in the middle of painting something, but here you can really see it's not that bad. Now that I was confident that I could actually achieve the look I was going for, I could go ahead and paint the rest of the pieces. Now to my favorite part, the face. Again, I go over to Blender to sculpt the head to match the screenshots I took as close as possible. Once it's printed, I go ahead and paint it the same way I did the body. It is a slightly different texture on the face part just because I wanted to keep it interesting. Since you stuck around for this long, I think it's time for the special announcement. This doll could actually be yours. Yes, that's right, I'll actually be listing this doll on my Etsy shop. The listing should be available not too long after this video is uploaded, so if you're interested, make sure you go check the description. Now back to actually making him. For his hair, I'm going to be using some chunky black yarn, doing the same method as my Telltale Heart video. When that's done, I simply glue it onto the head. With some final details and styling, he's done. I really love how he came out, and I hope you do too. Kindred was probably one of the first League of Legends champions that I ever saw, so I'm happy I finally found a reason to make at least half of the Kindred pair. Who knows, maybe one day I'll make Lamb. I already have a full list of projects, so I'm not making any promises yet. Like always, thank you so much for watching, stay sweet, and I'll see you next time.